for joining us for today's call on applicant tracking systems. My name is Jeff. I'm with the writer support team. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the basics of applicant tracking systems. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. It sounds like we have a nice clear line today, but if everyone would mute their phone to cut down on any possible background noise, that would be great. In terms of questions along the way, if you use the dialog box for chat, I will see your questions as they come through, and I will do my best to answer them as they come through. But I'll also be leaving a few minutes at the end of the presentation to also answer questions on the phone. So you have two options. You can ask questions via chat along the way, or you can ask questions on the phone at the end of the presentation. The presentation itself should be around 20 minutes, and that'll leave us time at the end for questions. So,
how do we mute the phone, Leslie?
I'm sorry, was there a question?
Yes, how do we mute the phone? Press, is it 4-star?
I believe it's either *4 or mute on your actual phone itself.
Okay.
If you have a cell phone, then just use the mute function there. So applicant tracking systems, we're going to talk, exactly what is applicant tracking system, how do they work, and what do we need to bear in mind when we're writing our resumes. Applicant tracking systems have really picked up quite the reputation over the last few years as the technology became in use more widely and by a larger number of companies. But, there's a lot written about applicant tracking systems, but job seekers
Jasmine.
Know precious little about actually how they function. They just know that it's a big bad bear in the corner that sends all of their resumes into a black hole. Really, what it did for companies is it, gave a method for managing vast amounts of candidate data. And originally, these were with the largest, used by the largest companies. Can I ask that one of the folks who just joined, please mute their phones? We have a lot of background noise from your line. Thank you so much. So we can really, it causes the job seeker and the candidate to do more work, because applicant tracking systems, if you send a general resume to everybody, on the planet, it's not going to work, because they will not align with the requirements of the job, and that's why so many applicants feel that their resume goes into a black hole. To work well in an applicant tracking system, it's essential that a resume is customized for a job. So, what is an applicant tracking system? It's an application that handles a company's recruitment process and manages their candidate data. Okay, so what does that mean? One aspect of applicant tracking systems is the piece that actually selects resumes for further review. But typically, they're part of much larger systems. If you have an HR background, they're part of your HRMS or your HRIS, or they can be a standalone system, that does one or two things only. And two of the largest names in applicant tracking systems are Taleo, which is an Oracle company, and Connexa, which is an IBM company. And very often when you look at a company website or you look at a job board, you'll see somewhere on the bottom, powered by Taleo or powered by Connexa. So they are the engines that run customized solutions for these companies. So you can buy it off the shelf, or you can have it highly customized as a solution. But those are the two main names. Here are some other ones like Bullhorn that you'll see that are starting to grow in use as well. But really, it is a place to receive potentially thousands and thousands of resumes. So if you are at a big company, the brand names that everybody wants to work for, Google or Microsoft or Intel or one of the big names, that why these systems came into being, because those companies received such an incredibly large volume of unsolicited resumes that they needed to have a way to manage the data. Now, originally, they were only used by the large companies, but now they're used by companies of all sizes. In fact, there are free applicant tracking system applications that are available, free and open source applications that are available for anybody to use. So they're used by recruiters also to aggregate candidates from large job boards. So at the end of this call, you can go online and search for free applicant tracking systems, and then set up an account where you put in a job description and then begin pulling candidates from all the major job boards at no cost. One of the key benefits to the company, though, about applicant tracking systems is hiring compliance. The systems do not see age, gender, ethnicity, or any of the other things that human beings can use to pass over a candidate. So as a first blush within a company's HR system, the ATS becomes very important to be compliant with employment laws. So that's why it's in use at virtually, from what we read online and from what we research, an applicant tracking system is in use by virtually every Fortune 500 company. But because the cost is coming down, they're really in use in the vast majority of companies, outside of, say, the mom and pop. We have to write our resumes in anticipation of the client's document going through an applicant tracking system. So how do they work? At the highest level, and again, we're going to talk about the one piece of the system that assists in the selection process. So I recognize that I'm not familiar with all of the other things that these applications do, but I'm going to focus on the applicant tracking system piece that we come in contact with as resume writers. And really, at the most simplistic level, the applicant tracking system compares the job resumes to job descriptions and job requirements. And there's two types of technology that are in use right now. The older systems read the file itself, and newer technology optically scans the document. Once again, I'm going to ask everybody to please mute their phone. We have, if you are shuffling around your office or in a noisy area, it's coming through loud and clear on the call. So if you would please be so kind as to mute your phone, that would be great. So, like I said, the older systems, so everybody knows that a text file works well, and if you have to cut and paste your resume into a box on a job application, that's an older system, and that reads the file. And the reason why a text file works well is because it eliminates a lot of the formatting that could confuse or bog down an applicant tracking system. The system, like any software application, can only read what's input. So, with text resumes, the formatting is gone, the fancy graphics are gone, and
Shirley Robbins.
The newer applicant tracking systems optically scan the document, which means it actually takes a picture of the words and transposes them into a data file. If the candidate can attach a doc file or a PDF, that's likely a newer system. And if that's an option, I recommend that the client always attach a file versus copy and paste. Sometimes there'll be an option between the two. My recommendation would be to attach the file. Older systems use simple technology that counted keywords and evaluated matches to the job ad or user input requirements. And these could get quite specific, but at the baseline, what they would do was say, okay, for every candidate for this project manager position, I'm looking for a minimum of 6 Sigma Green Belt. I'm looking for a minimum of a bachelor's degree. I'm looking for a minimum of 3 to 5 years experience. So it would look for bachelor's degree, it would look for 6 Sigma, and it would count the years of experience. And that's how it would say, this is the first blush at who we're going to move forward in the process. So for us, that was slightly easier because all we had to do was go into the job ad, look at what the requirements were, and make sure that the resume that we wrote reflected accurately those requirements. And that's still a very, very important piece of writing for applicant tracking systems. However, newer technology uses contextualization, and what that means, it's no longer good enough to simply stuff the words into the resume. Now it looks for context and relevance, and can also check where in a client's work history a skill was used or obtained. So, for example, if somebody lists, Java programming in a job 8 years ago, that's going to count differently than somebody who's using Java programming every day on their current job. And the new technology can understand from the client's content, what the context of the Java programming was, and place a higher value on somebody who is currently programming in Java on a daily basis versus someone who, say, took a class in it, in 2004. So the advent of contextualization or artificial intelligence in these systems really makes it more difficult to game the system. The old tricks were, fill the page with white font that would not appear to somebody, but would be read by a computer. Fill, stuff keywords in white font, stuff, 6-point font in the margins or anything like that. And for the older, less astute systems, that may have worked, but it will not work with the latest technology and anyone who's upgraded their system beyond that. So when we write with the applicant tracking system in mind, there are a couple of things to think about. We have to assume the client's resume will go through an applicant tracking system. So we're really writing for two people, for two viewers, the computer viewer and then hopefully the human viewer. So the resume has to perform well in the applicant tracking system. Then when it is hopefully delivered to a hiring authority, it has to look good and be perfect in all aspects so that it then passes the true human eye test and compels the individual to call our clients for an interview. One way to look at it is applicant tracking systems look for ways to include a resume, and humans look for ways to exclude resumes. So the system is saying, give me everybody in this pool of resumes that meets a certain criteria, and then passes that on to a human being who now has an inbox full of emails or a stack of resumes on their desk, and they are looking to make that stack as small as possible. So once I get the resume, then I'm looking for reasons to throw it away. So that's what I mean by the system looks for a way to include a resume, and humans look for a way to exclude resumes. So Talent Inc. templates are designed to perform well in applicant tracking systems and in the eyes of a human. We have clean formatting, we don't use graphics, and we also do not put critical information in headers or footers. So if you're trying to save space and you're thinking about putting the client's contact information in a header, please don't, because only the body of a resume is read by an applicant tracking system. We have to assume that the technology is not there. We have to, assume that the older technology is going to be in use, and headers and footers we know are not read by applicant tracking systems. So there will be times when the quality team may reach out to you and say, "Can you please remove the client contact information from the header and footer?" And that's most important on the first page. We certainly are okay with putting client information on the second page in a header. That's standard, because the applicant tracking systems don't understand or care about resume length. So if we don't see there's no risk of separation of one page from another in an applicant tracking system, and that's why we use the identifiers with the client name and typically phone number and email address in page 2 and page 3 if necessary in the header on subsequent pages, because that is for the human being. But it's important not to put contact information in a header on page 1. Okay. No fluff. Think about this. Put yourself, and I say this a lot on calls, picture yourself as the hiring manager. What are you looking for? Are you going to, you arrive at work that day, and in your inbox is the line of business manager says, I need a project management professional, and I need you to find that person as quickly as possible for me. Somebody just gave me their 2 weeks notice. So you sit down at your computer, you go into your applicant tracking system, and you start to search your existing database of resumes for project managers. You're not going to look for terms like passionate. You're not going to look for terms like self-starter. You're going to need, just like you would find, search for a job or do a Google search, you're going to put the words in that are going to give you your best returns. So, it's just, it's identical to you doing a Google search for a restaurant. You're not going to put dishes or plates in your search. You're going to put Mexican food or Italian food, and you're going to put things that are going to lead you specifically to what you're hoping to find. And the same thing works with applicant tracking systems. So it's important that we use meaningful words and phrases like Java programming and project management, because words like passionate and self-starter are probably not going to be used as search terms. Also, use adjectives sparingly. And this is, kind of a pet peeve of mine when I was a hiring manager. Folks who filled their resumes with adjectives. Adjectives are the opinion of the writer, and things like successfully or complex or high level or words like that, they could mean something different to me than they could to the writer. So, I like to use adjectives sparingly with applicant tracking systems in mind, because again, it's never going to be a search term. Try to begin a bullet with a verb. So, managed projects or programmed software, because you are more likely to get a relevant hit in an applicant tracking system with a verb than you will an adjective. Let me take a quick look. I just saw a question come through. The question is, how sensitive are ATS programs in identifying similar terms such as project management versus project manager? Should we generally use the personal title rather than the more general term? That's a good question, and chances are it will look at the root of the word. So management or manager, it will pull out manage, and not the back end of the word. I would take my clue from the language of the job description if you have one. If not, I would use the most widely used term. So if somebody is engaged in project management, the context would be different than if they are a project manager. Always try to go with the more assertive language. So in this case, project management is something that the client may do, but project manager is a title. I like to stay away from things like served as project manager, because what does that really mean? So you can say project managed, or simply managed, and then talk about the project itself. So, Catherine, it really depends on the context and how are you going to use it. There could be a place for both of those terms on the same resume. So, understand the keywords. And again, we want naturally occurring keywords in the resume. And by naturally occurring, I mean, in the language, in the content of the resume, so that when it is read by a human, because remember, that's our goal. We want every resume to be read by a human. It does not look like it was simply stuffed in there for the purpose of getting through to them. Because, I know, and in my career as a hiring manager, I picked up on all of that stuff. I was acutely aware of people who were trying to game the system, and the only place for a resume where I felt that way about the candidate was the round file under my desk. So, you try and write for the worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario is you get a hiring manager like me and take a lot of those things into consideration. So, what are keywords? Keywords are job title. past and present, and the title of the job you want. That's why it's such an effective strategy for somebody to title their resume with the title of the job that they're hoping to get. Names of tools, very specific. If somebody can operate a forklift, if you are using software, Access, SAP, Salesforce.com. Think of yourself again as searching for a candidate. What do you want to know about them? Specific techniques like supply chain management that are specific to the job, profession, or industry. Relevant education and training, very important that it's relevant. If somebody has a nursing background but then got their master's in data analysis, there's really no need to put the nursing education on the resume. No one's ever going to search for a nursing degree for somebody who's in IT. So relevant education and training, including degrees, applicable majors, licenses, and certifications. And I know and I recognize that this is an area of a lot of pushback for our clients because a lot of our clients spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort getting their training and education. And when we say it's not relevant and they say we want to put it in there, that creates a little bit of push-pull. So one way I always try and explain it is that if somebody was searching for your current career path, they would not be looking for somebody with an unrelated educational background. So again, it's one of the ways I like to try and explain why I exclude certain backgrounds, certain experiences, and it could be the same thing with jobs. When we put unrelated jobs on a resume, it just fills space, but has precious little relevance to the job. Also, common industry terms, products, services, professional and technical acronyms. It's always, when using acronyms, it's always best to, it's essential that the first reference to the acronym, it is spelled out. And then if you're going to use the acronym in the future, that's okay. But, remember that not everybody knows the industry acronyms. So, for example, somebody can be a staffer or an assistant in the human resources department for a manufacturer, and they may know human resources, but they may not know manufacturing. So once the resume gets through to the human being, we want them to be able to understand, the client, and what they've done. And this is especially difficult with military and military to civilian transitions because the military, as you know, revolves around acronyms. And, it's really important that when we're making a transition from military to civilian that we identify some of those more complex acronyms. If you don't know what they are, certainly look them up. If it's something that's very common and you still can't figure out from the context which acronym definition it is, simply ask the client. And also, professional committee or association memberships. It may be very important for somebody who's hiring a trainer that they're a member of the ASTD, the American Society of Training and Development, because that indicates that they are active in the trainer community. So things like that become very important. Use text analysis. Two that I use are Wordle.net and TwoCloud.com. Okay? And what you do there is you copy and paste. Sorry, just waiting for that siren to pass. If you are, you copy and paste the job description into Wordle.net, TwoCloud.com. If you have a fire engine going by,
line muted.
Please mute your phone. Thank you so much. Okay, so sorry about that. Text analysis will identify the most commonly used words in a paragraph or series of statements. And what I typically like to do is I like to take a sample of 2 or 3 job applications from a client, job descriptions from a client's chosen career path, and I plop them into Wordle or to Cloud, and it'll identify the most common words and phrases. And then you still have to sort through them. Your job is not that simple. You still have to sort through and pull out the relevant terms, but that's a good way to start. Avoid excess color, graphics, and unusual fonts. Most of our templates do not include those. Those are for highly specific circumstances where we are confident that the resume is going to wind up in the hands of a human being. But the applicant tracking systems do not see color graphics, and in the worst cases, cannot read unusual fonts, and may just come out on the human side of the system as garbled text. And finally, as with anything, proofread, proofread, proofread. If you spell a key word or key phrase incorrectly, the system will not read it. It's really important. Plus, you get to me after the applicant tracking system and you have an error in your resume, I'm going to throw it away. So the important thing here from an applicant tracking system perspective is not to misspell any keywords or phrases, because you'll lose the opportunity for them to be read by the system. Okay, so that kind of hopefully sets a baseline for writing for applicant tracking systems. We get a little understanding of what they are, how they're used, and we wanted to get this information out there so that we can go into more detail in future calls and get into some specifics about how to optimize resumes for applicant tracking systems. I do have another question that just came in. Let me take a quick look at it. Regarding relevant education, what about someone who switches disciplines in the same field? I've had people who started in nursing and are now ultrasound techs or EMTs that go into physical therapy. Should the earlier education still be left off? What if the recent work experience is still in the previous field? Well, there's two different questions there. The previous work experience is going to have to stay because that is important. But with regard to the education, that's one of the things that we have to determine, as professional writers. Is it relevant? And do you think that somebody is going to benefit? If it is the same field and switching discipline, without seeing a specific example, my gut feeling would be yes, absolutely include it, because you can go from being a CNA to a nurse, and then your CNA experience is absolutely critical to your candidacy as a nurse. So if you are in healthcare, all of the healthcare experience is relevant. So hopefully that helps to answer that question. The next question, is it still accurate to say that our resume format needs to be kept in their given order because ATS systems expect certain info to be presented in a certain order, such as putting education after work experience? That's a great question. And the answer, I will be absolutely vague, is yes and no. What the system is looking for is not necessarily the order of the sections, but the order of the titles. If the first thing, if for example, you happen to make a mistake and you put the client's address before their name at the top, then the system would think that the address is the client's name. It would not recognize the numbers as being part of a name and reject the resume from the system. Also, we hear that dates first when listing jobs in chronological order doesn't work as well as listing the company name first, followed by a date, followed by a title. Okay. Now, the system is going to look for things in certain places, and it looks for titles, but as long as it sees the education, it won't really know or care whether it's before the work experience or after. That's the determining factor for, when somebody is reading the resume, if their highest value offered is their education, and this is typically the case for recent grads or folks who recently completed advanced education, then I would put it before. But I don't think that's a consideration in terms of the sections, as long as it's titled properly by saying something like education or training as opposed to college background. It would not understand, if you use the title like college background, it wouldn't understand what came next. But education, training, education and training, credentials, things like that, the systems are set up to read. So I don't think in that case the location of education is going to be a factor for applicant tracking systems. It could, however, be an important factor for a human reader. Okay, so I see that we're right at 12:30 here on the East Coast. I'd like to open.
Line unmuted.
I'd like to open it up to questions on the phone or via chat. I apologize for running a little late, and I want to respect everybody's time. But the presentation ran a few minutes longer than I expected, so I'll go ahead and open up to the floor for questions.
Jeff, a question. How many years back should you go in a person's work experience?
Rule of thumb and best practice for resume writing is 10 to 12 years, possibly 15 at the outside edge, but there could be specific instances or reasons to include older experience. Me personally, I simply don't care what somebody did 20 years ago. The manner in which we did business back then is radically different than the manner in which we do business today, and I don't want somebody to give me details about something that is not current. That's my personal perspective, but also it's a what have you done for me lately world of employment right now, and your skills have to be fresh and current. So 10 to 12 years, maybe 15 at the outset, except in specific instances. If somebody's worked for one company for 35 years, we want to be able to reflect that appropriately.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yes?
Yes.
Hi, this is Jasmine. I asked a question about the relevant education, about including things that are still in the field. My question about recent work experience, if you should still include it if it's in the previous field, was actually a related question. So my question is really, when they switched disciplines, so let's say a nurse has gone into the ultratech sound field, and there's nursing experience that is within the last 5 years. When they switched into the ultrasound field, maybe they only have one position in the ultrasound field. I've had people where the nursing field, they have an associate degree, they have maybe a bachelor's degree, they have like 3 certifications in the nursing field. If I were to eliminate some of those, would it hurt the applicant? That's what I'm really asking. So in sort of like, if you have recent experience that is in a discipline that is sort of slightly different but in the same field, I don't know how much I would want to remove, or is it implied that they have the relevant education and certifications for positions they're no longer interested in?
To answer the last question first, it would never be implied that somebody has the appropriate education and training. That is always important to list. I think my answer would still be yes, because we are still in the healthcare field, and there's a lot of transferable skills from nursing into ultrasound that can be highlighted. Plus, we want the language to be achievement based. So we're talking about client interactions. We're talking about patient education. We're talking about a lot of things that are absolutely aligned with going into ultrasound, technology, because there's still going to be, all of that patient contact. So I think it's absolutely relevant in the case that in the example that you gave.
Okay, so in that example, you would still put, when there's like unrelated to ultratech, there's like certifications and those sorts of things that are only relating to nursing. You would still include those things, and it wouldn't hurt the applicant in terms of the applicant tracking system?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. My main concern was really, I think the person who, like for the one that I did, I already finished that one a while ago, but for the one that I did, it was clear that she did not want to essentially be offered nursing positions over the ultrasound positions. And so she was trying to minimize how much of her nursing experience was included on her resume.
Well, that's a whole different story. If she doesn't want to be offered nursing positions, she just need not apply to them. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. We always say, I don't want to do that. People always tell us what they don't want to do, but we need to know what they do want to do. But as a hiring manager, I don't care what you don't want to do either. But that's a valid question, and I completely understand. Other questions? Okay, great. I hope you found the session helpful for reference, or if you would like to take a look at the slides. The presentation will be loaded along with the audio onto the knowledge base, and you'll be able to see that there. Tomorrow, we are having our noon Eastern time call for newer writers, and next week, all of our calls and our training session, which will be this topic again, will be at 3 o'clock Eastern time for folks who find that more convenient. As always, never hesitate to email me with comments or suggestions or feedback about these sessions, or if you have suggestions for future training calls. My email address is jeffm@talentinc.com. I always welcome your feedback and suggestions, and would love to hear from folks with suggestions for future training topics. So with that, I will wish everybody a wonderful Wednesday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your week, and thank you so much for participating in the call. We had a great turnout, by the way. We actually had a sold-out session today of 25 participants. So thank you so much for joining. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Hello?
Yes.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes?
Yes. I'm looking for Sean.
He may have left the call. Did you have a call with him at 12:30?